I'd like to welcome you to our online presentation today with Natural Habitat Adventures. We're here to talk about Yellowstone and the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, truly America's wonderland. And we're here today with Jared. He is a naturalist with Natural Habitat Adventures, and he received his BS degree in wildlife biology from the University of Montana in Missoula. His field research experiences have taken him around a great portion of western North America, where he's worked as a populations biologist involved with studies of snowshoe hare, lynx, wolverines, mule deer, and a variety of birds. Jared is an avid outdoorsman, I should say. He spends a great deal of his time exploring the wildlands of Yellowstone ecosystem with his fly rod, camera, and backpack, and I know that we'll probably be seeing a lot of his photographs today in the presentation. For a decade, Jared has worked as a naturalist in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem with a focus on predator-prey interactions, and this has given him a great insight into the behavior of Yellowstone's wolves, making him an exceptional guide on Natural Habitat's Yellowstone adventures. Jared's passion for nature has also brought him to the frozen north, where he's guided polar bear expeditions in Churchill and Spitsbergen since 2003. So we are in great hands today with Jared. And Jared, thanks for taking time out to share your knowledge with us. I'll turn it over to you now.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for joining me today. This is a unique opportunity for me as a naturalist. I typically spend my time looking through binoculars and not necessarily through a computer screen, so this is a little bit of a unique opportunity for me. I'd like to thank Natural Habitat Adventures for allowing me this opportunity to share my home, my passion with people from really around the world. And I look forward to your questions. I am so used to spending a week sharing my passion with guests that this will be a bit of a challenge for me, but I welcome this opportunity. So, as Lee said, I have been working with Natural Habitat Adventures for the last decade, sharing my backyard with visitors from far and wide. It's my privilege to be able to live in a place like Jackson Hole, Wyoming, to utilize the wonderful resources of Grand Teton National Park and Yellowstone National Park. And today, my goal is to share just a glimpse of that with you. I'll be using photographs that I have taken, that my colleagues and fellow guides have taken, and friends of mine that live here in this ecosystem have taken. So with that, I would love to share a little bit of Greater Yellowstone with you. This truly is America's wonderland. It's a place that is accessible to the average public. It's a place that's accessible to those that want to explore deeply into some of the most wild and untamed lands in North America. So with that, let's begin. It may take a moment for my computer to advance, but once it does, we're in good hands. So, Yellowstone National Park, a place often referred to as Wonderland, became the first national park in the world in 1872. It's a place that has remained incredibly wild. It's gone through times of change. It's gone through different management plans for wildlife and how the landscape has been managed. It's a place that was opened up to the American public and to the world really through the major rail companies that service the American West. And this is an image that was used as a marketing piece by the Northern Pacific Railroad back in the early 1900s when rail service really started to bring people to Yellowstone. Many people are used to seeing Yellowstone as a place that is receiving 3.5 million visitors during the course of the year. But for me, it's a place that I know those visitors come, but I'd like to experience it a little bit more on the wild side. And it's a place that's pretty easy to do that. To give you a little lay of the land, the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, in the north central Rocky Mountains. On the southern border of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which is that green blob there in the middle, on the southern boundary of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is the town of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. famous for its cowboy culture, for its world-class skiing. To the north is Bozeman, Montana, where Montana State University is, a town that was developed because of its agricultural background, its fertile lands. Off to the west is the great state of Idaho. The greater Yellowstone ecosystem incorporates somewhere between 18 to 20 million acres of land, roughly 10,000 square miles. It's roughly the size of the Serengeti National Park in East Africa, Tanzania and Kenya. Many people know this great place, and the reason why I have this slide in here is often people refer to Yellowstone as the Serengeti of North America. You know, it's a little bit of an apples and oranges kind of comparison, but it is a wild, wild place. Approximately the same size. If anybody's tuning in from the great state of Massachusetts, we're talking about a place roughly the size of Massachusetts. It's a place that over the years has incredible history, incredible culture, incredible ties of native peoples to the land. I love this old image of the American West here. If you notice those wolves that are encroaching on these bison here, they're actually native peoples underneath those wolf robes, carrying bows and arrows. And I love the eyes of these bison as they're staring. Well, there's an amazing connection of people and wildlife together, coexisting in a landscape, utilizing the landscape and interacting. Native peoples have been associated with the greater Yellowstone ecosystem for over 11,000 years. We go back and we have well over 20 different groups of Native Americans that still today respect and revere Yellowstone and the greater Yellowstone ecosystem as a portion of their culture, their life history. And in the days of these enormous herds of bison, it was a really wild place. We lost some of that wildness as we began to explore the American West with Lewis and Clark opening the American West, the rails, and the mountain men era coming into the area. But today it's a place that is reestablishing these wonderful interactions. From the days of Lewis and Clark to the mountain man era, Yellowstone is a place that remains wild. The mountain men really began to exploit the resources of greater Yellowstone in the 1820s and 1830s. People like John Coulter, who left the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery to head into the interior Yellowstone Country, began to explore this place. They began to talk about places of fields of boiling mud and backwards waterfalls, referring to some of the geologic features that are found in Yellowstone. It's those geothermals that these mountain men weren't necessarily able to truly explain that really led to the conservation of this land. So for 30, 40 years, the area was exploited for its beavers, for its bighorn sheep, for its bison populations, before the park was actually established as the world's first national park. In 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant signed Yellowstone National Park into law as the world's first national park. It was signed into law for the benefit and the enjoyment of the people. That's one of the most controversial statements that the national park system in the United States has ever encountered. What people benefit from today in 2013 is very different from what the benefits may have been in 1872 when the park was first established. But the reason for this establishment of the park was to create a place where these resources, these geologic wonders like geysers and hot springs and mud pots, and these amazing waterfalls, they could be left untouched, for lack of a better term. And that today is still the case, but it's a place that has a lot of challenges. I benefit and I enjoy the wonderful wildlife resources. I benefit from knowing that there are wolves lurking in this incredible place, that there's grizzly bears, that there are trumpeter swans, there are boreal chorus frogs. Somebody else may benefit from the opportunity to go snowmobile in Yellowstone. Another person may benefit from climbing the Grand Teton in Grand Teton National Park. So it's an amazing place, amazingly diverse and rich. But those geologic resources, the geysers, the landscape, the mountain ranges of the Tetons that were protected under an act of Congress, those places today have left a landscape that allow me to understand, allow me to share with my guests this beautiful place, that ever ongoing struggle for wildness to occur. It's a landscape that really, more or less, is a place, a feast, a place where animals at certain times of the year are going to be overwhelmed with a resource of food. In the spring, the lush green grasses are growing on the valley floor of Jackson or in the valley floor of the Lamar Valley. But it's also a place that really, over time, can create some unique scenarios. Places where wildlife can roam freely, they can move across vast landscapes. It's a place where once this might have been a challenge to see bison in the wild, to see herds that roam freely in and out of the park. Really an interesting place. So I refer to this as a land of feast or famine. You can go from those lush green grasses, and in a matter of days you can be enduring winter storms like this. A harsh landscape. A place where that is going to be a struggle to survive. It's a place that when we are on our winter natural habitat adventure programs, it's a challenge for us as humans. It's a challenge for these wild animals to exist. And something very unique, something that not a lot of people can handle. It's one of the reasons why this place remains one of the least populated areas in North America. So feast, famine, it's always a struggle to endure what Yellowstone throws at you. The only day that Yellowstone National Park has not recorded snowfall is July 14th. That's the only day that it's never been recorded in Yellowstone, at least in modern history. That tells you that this is a place that really is a struggle. These bison here in this photograph are making their way through a geyser basin. If it weren't for those geologic resources, that hot water, there would be no way for these animals to survive the deep snows of Yellowstone. One of the most unique features of Yellowstone National Park, of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, is its dependence upon fire. There may be some people in the audience today who have never seen a wildfire. There may be people that sit and are enduring wildfires in their backyard as we speak. There may be people that came to Yellowstone in the summer of 1988, a time when approximately a third of Yellowstone National Park experienced some sort of fire event. Well, in 1988, it was a time when the natural system came together to create a perfect storm of being dynamic, a place that changed Yellowstone but did not ruin it. I was a child in 1988. My experiences seeing the national park prior and just post the fires of '88 have really led me to having a greater appreciation of this place. This would be a pretty dramatic event for anybody to experience. It's not something that we typically would experience on a trip just because of the dangerous proximity to something like this, but it's something that changed the landscape, in my opinion, for the better. It opened up views that once were covered by conifer trees, lodgepole pine trees. It allowed a place for animals that are grazing animals to experience a population growth because of the availability of grass. So a very dynamic place. When the mass media of the United States portrayed Yellowstone as a place that was changed forever, it was ruined, it actually created more interest in this national park than it had ever experienced before. Since 1988, visitation to Yellowstone National Park has steadily increased. And I believe it's not just the fires of '88 that caused this to happen, but our desires to see wild places for ourselves. Wild places exist. They exist in Africa. They exist in Asia. They exist in the far north, in the far south. And they exist right here in the lower 48 states. Grand Teton National Park, established in 1929 in combination with the establishment of Yellowstone National Park in 1872, have created the most intact ecosystem in the lower 48 states. A place where everything that existed prior to European settlement of the Americas exists today. And that's only because we can say that we brought wolves back, that we maintained populations of grizzly bears, that we allowed trumpeter swans to exist, and really have conserved the landscape. And that's one thing that I love to share with people, is that conservation has allowed us to have these wonderful opportunities to see wildlife. The conservation of landscapes like Yellowstone, like Grand Teton National Park, the surrounding national forests, the national wildlife refuges, and even the private lands have really kept this a wide open space. And because of that, because of those spaces, because of the acreage, the miles, thousands of square miles of open space, we have incredible herds of animals. This is probably one of the most numerous animals in the ecosystem, the Rocky Mountain elk. Elk exist throughout the ecosystem. Their numbers are incredibly abundant. In the winter months in Jackson, Wyoming, we have a congregation of typically somewhere between 6,000 to 8,000 elk, literally a matter of feet from our town square on the National Elk Refuge. These animals must figure a way to survive the winter. It's either a situation where they must migrate to survive, they must endure the winter, or they must hibernate. And each animal has its own strategy. If you're a songbird, you may head to Costa Rica. If you're a calliope hummingbird, you may head down to Baja, Mexico. If you're an elk, you come to the edge of the town of Jackson. And these are incredible opportunities to see animals, to see them close, to see them intimately, to see how the battle for survival really unfolds. But it's not only elk. There's lots of large ungulates. We have the Shiras moose, the smallest of the 3 subspecies of moose found in North America, smaller, much smaller than the moose you may see in Denali National Park or up in the Yukon. But a beautiful, beautiful creature, a creature that truly thrives in Jackson Hole, an animal that we see more of in the Tetons than we see in Yellowstone, and that's all because of habitat. Yellowstone's a high volcanic plateau, lots of pine trees, not a lot of succulent browse forage down in the Tetons, something we see more regularly. Probably one of the most iconic species, from the wooden nickels of old-time America to images of Buffalo Bill Cody and the American West. Unfortunately, images of slaughters of thousands upon thousands of these animals, really millions, to see the American bison existing, thriving in Grand Teton National Park, thriving in Yellowstone National Park, but truly isolated to these places. They really are not allowed to roam outside of these national parks due to competition with cattle ranging. There are some tough topics to deal with bison, but what an opportunity. Back in the early 1900s, there were less than 25 of these animals left in Yellowstone National Park, truly the last free-roaming herd. Due to conservation efforts of the National Park Service, these animals have come back, they've survived, they've thrived in the American West. And today, they are probably the most formidable prey for things like wolves and grizzly bears. An absolutely humbling experience to see these animals, to feel them breathe, to watch them endure places like Yellowstone and the Tetons. An absolute favorite of mine, I love this image taken by my good friend Paul Brown, a fellow guide for Natural Habitat Adventures. An image that, while it's not crisp, it captures the essence of this animal. This is the American pronghorn, an animal truly adapted to the wide open plains of the Lamar Valley, Jackson Hole, the great state of Wyoming, and many other grasslands here in the western United States. Just truly an unbelievable creature to witness. And I love sharing the life history of these animals. An animal that's fast, an animal that almost always has twins when it gives birth. We refer to it as an obligate twinner. Sharing that, picking sage and smelling it and seeing how this animal can survive off of that. It's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for me to share. One of the highlights for many people when they come to the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is to see probably the ungulate species that is most highly threatened in North America. Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. Their populations have dwindled. Their habitat has consistently been encroached upon. And often these animals are subject to disease. And bighorn sheep are a wonderful creature. We all probably have images of these animals butting heads, whether it's images from Asia or here in North America. Just a very dynamic animal, an animal that has an incredibly complex social structure that lives in herd groups, typically bachelor groups of males and maternal groups of ewes and lambs, but just amazing. Without the conservation of these large tracts of land, we wouldn't have any of those species. And without these species, we wouldn't be able today to walk into Grand Teton National Park or Yellowstone National Park and see grizzly bears. This is a bear, a very famous bear in Grand Teton National Park right now, known as female grizzly bear 610. She just kicked out her 3 cubs in the last week. A little epic struggle that we're watching unfold here daily as she's getting ready to breed, hopefully again, and hopefully help this species recover and grow, as grizzly bears are soon to probably be taken off the endangered species list here in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. It's really been a wonderful opportunity for me in my lifetime to see these bears go from just a few to really a few hundred in the ecosystem. So it's really a wonderful thing. Probably the most iconic species associated with Yellowstone in recent times is the gray wolf, a species that I have an incredible amount of respect for, an incredible amount of passion for. And as you can see, this isn't just summertime images. These are wintertime images, and this is an animal that specializes in the winter months. It's truly what has set Yellowstone aside. For those that read national and international newspapers, there's been a lot of talk about wolves in the northern Rockies, and that wolves have been taken off the endangered species list and are now vulnerable to hunting outside of the national parks. And that was part of the compromise to bring these animals back. It's something that we struggle with. It's something that is a topic in our local newspapers almost every day. But there is no better place in the world than Yellowstone National Park to watch the drama and social structure of these animals unfold. Their battle to survive and raise their pups depends upon elk management, bison, and bighorn sheep. It's really unique. And one of the things that I love to share with my guests is the opportunity to witness a scene like this. The reason why I say there's no better place in the world to see wildlife like this is that we have these dramatic landscapes. In this image of a black wolf overlooking a portion of the Lamar Valley, you can see these distant scenes. Now, I would love to see wolves 10 feet away. It's something that happens, but it happens pretty infrequently. Seeing an image like this is something that we get to watch. And this is actually, for me and my fellow guides and my fellow wolf watchers, this is what we love to see because we're watching interactions of animals. We're watching that classic predator and that prey in the background and slowly seeing that battle between these two creatures unfold. This next image is an image that was released by the National Park Service early on into the reintroduction of wolves back just following 1995 and 1996, when wolves were brought from Canada. They were captured in Canada. They were brought to Yellowstone, held in acclimation pens where they were able to get used to the sights and the smells of Yellowstone, and then eventually released into the wilds to feed upon these incredible herds of elk, bison, bighorn sheep. Again, this isn't necessarily a great image, but it's the image of wildness. To me, I grew up in the northeast of the United States. There are certain sounds that I associate with the wild. I think all of us especially if you're coming from European cultures. Um, the image of a wolf howling under a full moon is something that just naturally strikes a chord within our souls. The sound of a loon calling on a lake in the great state of Maine or in Canada or Minnesota, those are wild sounds. And to me, there's nothing more humbling than knowing that this still exists in the wild. And it exists because passionate people took a stance and said, we must do something to preserve this ecosystem, to bring it back, and really following wonderful conservation ethics of people like Aldo Leopold, President Teddy Roosevelt, and really looking towards we as humans are a member of this system. We're not necessarily the controlling factor, but we play a role in this, and it's right to have these animals in this ecosystem. That doesn't mean that there aren't controversies, because there really are, and people's livelihoods do depend on cattle and sheep and elk, and for me, watching wolves and enjoying these wonderful places. So it's just an unbelievable opportunity to see this kind of thing unfold. I truly love, here's a scenario in the Lamar Valley, right near Soda Butte Cone, the confluence of the Soda Butte Creek and the Lamar River, of watching wolves just be social. Be animals that we often associate similar to our dogs in our living rooms, in our backyards, playing with each other, howling, barking, tackling each other. I love watching this. And these are something, this opportunity is something that you really can see unfold in Yellowstone. You can see it in the summer, you can see it in the spring, in the fall, but what an opportunity to see that kind of image in the winter. Now, these are distant images. These are images that I've taken through my binoculars and my spotting scope. Sometimes I've taken these kind of things through my camera lens, but it's just really amazing to see that dynamic. And I love this image with the black wolves and the gray wolves. They're all gray wolves, but they come in various coat colors. Just really a wonderful opportunity. So from wolves, there's lots of other things to see. There's predators on the wing, things like golden eagles and bald eagles, a species that has been conserved through the elimination of pesticide use here in North America, has really made an incredible recovery. These are things that we can see on any given day in Greater Yellowstone. Sometimes we see them in a distance, sometimes we see them very closely. It's just truly inspiring to see these animals. For me, besides my love of large mammalian carnivores, I can't think of an animal that in my heart strikes me with any more passion than this species, the great gray owl. North America's largest owl species that survives here throughout the seasons, spring, summer, winter. It's just an unbelievable animal, and there's no better place. We are currently undergoing a study in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem of these birds, and early research is showing that there's probably the highest density of these birds found anywhere in the lower 48 states is found right here in Jackson Hole. Just truly a wonderful opportunity. Well, if it wasn't for this creature, North America's largest native rodent species, the beaver, the American West may never have been opened up. Obviously, it would have at some point, but beavers thrive in the Tetons. They're making an incredible comeback. Some people may be familiar with some research that shows that with the presence of wolves in the ecosystem and wolves changing the behavior of bison and elk, there's been a release of grazing pressure on vegetation along rivers, and that's allowed cottonwood trees and willow shrubs to grow in Yellowstone National Park, and it's allowed a food source to become available for beavers again, and that beaver numbers are recovering in Yellowstone National Park. What a beautiful and clever animal right there. Right at a sunset photo in a little stream here in Yellowstone National Park. Small creatures, they don't all have to weigh 2,000 pounds and have big, sharp teeth. They don't have to be a bison or a grizzly bear to be unique and beautiful. Least chipmunks have managed to survive in this ecosystem up to 10,000 feet in elevation. Just really beautiful creatures. Little guys, just as important as the big animals, just as important as the wide open landscape, in my opinion. For me, every year, one of the beauties after enduring a long winter in Yellowstone is seeing the arrival of mountain bluebirds. This is one of our first songbirds to arrive every year. They come back in these enormous flocks, and then they begin to establish their territories in Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park. And they have a beautiful, beautiful little song. What an opportunity after a winter of white snow and gray skies to have this beautiful bit of blue show back up on our landscape. And these are the things that I think it takes sometimes a little bit of patience to be able to recognize and realize that it's such a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to see. And sometimes it takes a guide to point it out. Sometimes it takes you a moment to say, hey, you can watch this animal, and you might be able to watch the same species if you live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, or you live on the Front Range of Colorado. Maybe you don't see a mountain bluebird when you live in New York or Delaware, but you may see an eastern bluebird. And just take that moment to use those binoculars and get an appreciation of such an amazing creature. Seasonally, we see different animals in different places. And that's one of the things I love to see. Now, if I could convince all of you, you would all move to Jackson, Wyoming, and we'd have a population of several million. But every season changes, and every season provides different opportunities. So while a minute ago I showed you a great gray owl in a springtime setting, with some snow in the background, here's a great gray owl in the fall with beautiful aspen foliage surrounding it. And that's one of the things that it takes time to experience, the seasonal shifts. And while our trips are only a week long, we hope to convince you that these are wonderful opportunities. Dramatic landscapes. For those in the audience that love old westerns, you may recognize these mountains, the Tetons. They're in classic films like Shane with Alan Ladd and Gene Arthur. This photograph is actually taken right from where Shane, his cabin was in that classic movie, out on Antelope Flats. An early spring flower that we get to enjoy. And who says we don't have elephants in the Tetons? We've got elephant head plants. The beautiful wildflower that grows in wet meadows, sometimes at high elevation, sometimes at the valley floor. Sometimes it just takes stopping, getting out, getting away from a vehicle, taking a 5-minute stroll out into a meadow where there's no trail, and beautiful things will be right there at your feet. If you're willing to get on your hands and knees, you get some beautiful shots of these. You start to experience a place in a way that you may not have thought of. You may have thought just geysers or just waterfalls or just mountains. But these beautiful wildflowers are there in the spring and the early summer months. And then, you know what? A cold, rainy afternoon in September can provide some really unique up-close experiences with something that's not so beautiful to the naked eye, but when you take a closer look, you go, wow, look at those little droplets on the fringe sage on the valley floor. Those are the types of things that we as guides love to share with our guests. And taking a closer look, really getting intimate, and going, okay, that water droplet right there is providing just enough moisture for that plant to survive so that a pronghorn may come in, maybe a sage grouse will come here and feed on this particular bush. And maybe it was once upon a time a Native American sat here and hunted that sage grouse in order to feed their family. And those are the connections I like to make with my guests, to the land, to the wildlife, to the flora of the area. Again, some seasonal shifts here. Let's look at a couple of images. There is no large mammal in this picture, but it's stunning. This is a photograph taken by a friend of mine, Henry Holdsworth, a local photographer in Jackson. And it's just a beautiful, stark image. Well, that beautiful, stark image can be slightly different if taken from a different angle during a different season, during fall foliage, using a little bit of a different shutter speed in your camera. Now you have a different image and a totally different feeling. Beautiful, crisp blue sky with leaves falling from these aspen trees. Or maybe it's a distant image of aspens and Douglas fir trees and lodgepole pine trees in a different setting. And during our fall trips, we do offer photograph trips or photography trips. We also offer some classic departures. These are the things that we can experience, and you never know when that first winter snow is going to arrive. It's usually in September. Sometimes it's a little earlier, but when it happens, just a light dusting. Maybe our fingers are cold in the morning. There's nothing like a hot cup of cocoa or tea to go along with that to warm you up and to spend time just enjoying wildness and beauty. In Yellowstone, when we head back into Yellowstone, it might just be an up-close photograph of bacteria growing in the runoff channel of Yellowstone that inspires somebody. For me, it may be a great gray owl or a mountain bluebird. For another person, it may be the howl of a wolf. For somebody else, it might be just looking at this beautiful abstract form of living bacteria in hot waters that trigger their passion, their emotion for wild places and wild things, and places where things are relatively untouched. So I just really enjoy that opportunity to share that. But again, without the conservation of wild places, large landscapes, conservation that's driven by passion in our heart, curiosity for the unknown, concern for places that may not be in our backyard. Without that conservation of land, we can't conserve species of wildlife. And that means if we're in Africa, or we're in Asia, or we're in the Antarctic, or the high Arctic, or here in Greater Yellowstone, conserving places and allowing things to just be is the key to loving this. It might be without conservation, we wouldn't have bison running down the road in the winter. It might be that without conservation and without passion, we wouldn't be able to hear wolves howl in the wild. And to me, I'm not okay with that. I need to know that this exists, and I need to know that people enjoy this and people feel a connection to this kind of thing. So with that, I'd like to just explain to you a little bit about our programs and about how we provide programs in Yellowstone National Park and Grand Teton National Park. We provide, as Natural Habitat Adventures, programs in every season, in the spring, the summer, the winter, the fall. I guess I did those out of order, but it's a unique opportunity, and every season has a benefit and every season has a challenge. In winter, the challenge is being cold, and it's something that we all will experience, is being cold during the winter months. But it's also something that you'll experience without other people, without the sounds of cars driving by and you know, the sound of motor coaches. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just different. So during our winter months, when we're traveling through Yellowstone, we're traveling sometimes in these classical Bombardier snow machines, a very different way for people to travel. These were once used as ambulances and school buses in the Arctic. Today, it provides us an opportunity to travel in a nice, cozy atmosphere, talking to each other, enjoying this beautiful landscape. The rest of the time, we may be in vans. It just depends upon the season. We have the opportunity to get out, get away from the roads. Even during the winter months, we'll provide snowshoes for our guests to strap on their feet. Nothing like being a mountain man with a pair of high-tech snowshoes on your feet. Maybe come across an old elk skull from an animal that maybe was killed by wolves. Maybe it was something that just died of other natural causes, old age, starvation. Who knows? But it really provides us the opportunity to see something. But what myself and my fellow guides really strive to do is put you in a place where you can experience Yellowstone on your own, in your own particular way. An opportunity to experience one of the most visited national parks in a way that's providing solitude. And that can happen at any time of the year. And it's just truly an opportunity that's easy for most American travelers. It's close. It's usually 1 or 2 flights away for most people to get to this incredible place. And so it's really something that I truly love. And it's something unique. How many people get to go out on a horse-drawn sleigh into a herd of 6,000 elk? Not very many, but we can do that here in Jackson Hole, and that's something that we need to honor and respect and make sure exists in the future for young and old. So with that, I'd like to thank my fellow guides and colleagues, the National Park, for working so diligently to protect this incredible landscape. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful place that I get to call my backyard. I feel very fortunate that I'm able to share Yellowstone with so many visitors, and I know it's a privilege, and I look forward to answering any questions I can answer for guests, whether it's about spring, summer, fall, winter. I'm here for you. The Natural Habitat Office is there for you to answer questions. And with that, Lee, if you want to answer or provide any questions to me, I'm happy to engage.
Great. Yes, thank you, Jared. And we do have some questions, and I'd like to just share a reminder with everyone. If you would like to send a question in and have me read it to Jared, you can do that by opening up the control panel over on the right. Just click on the orange rectangle with the white arrow in it. Once it's open, you'll see the area called questions. Just click into that area and you'll see the question box. So we do have some questions here, Jared. Let's start with this one. When would you recommend the best month when would you say the best month for visiting Yellowstone would be?
You know, it's a challenging question because there are pros and cons to every season. If your desire is truly to experience something that's outside of most people's comfort zone, winter is an extreme time of year. It's a time of year where you're going to be challenged by the weather, but you're going to feel a place that's most raw and basic element. It's a time when you may have some really incredible wolf opportunities because it's a species that thrives in the winter and the deep snow conditions. But that being said, you come in May or early June, it's a time that all of the ungulates are giving birth. The grass is green, the mountains are covered in snow, but the grass is green on the valley floor. And so animals are giving birth, and they're in incredibly high density areas. There's incredible concentrations. So that's a really amazing time. You come during the autumn, and you get these spectacular autumn images of aspen leaves and cold, crisp nights, and you have animals that are going in and getting ready for that winter season, so they're feeding excessively. You know, a grizzly bear may feed for 18 to 20 hours during the autumn, and so that provides us a lot of time to watch those creatures. So every season has its benefit, and every season has its challenge. And so it's a hard question. If you're hardy and you're ready for an adventure, go for the winter. It's something that you'll probably not forget. If you're not so keen on being a little bit chilly, and we'll provide great opportunities of being warm. We're going to provide big down jackets and big boots for all of our guests. But if you're out for a different opportunity, autumn may be the time because you might have a 70-degree day followed by a 30-degree night. If you're looking for little babies running through the landscape and bison calves playing, spring might be the time. So it's a challenge to pick one.
Yeah, I can see that. What about the question here about accommodations? What are the accommodations like during the tours?
Sure. Typically throughout the seasons we use very similar accommodations. Accommodations are always private rooms and private baths. Let's just describe it from, say, Jackson moving north. If we start in the town of Jackson, we stay in a nice hotel in downtown Jackson. Jackson and Jackson Hole are more or less synonymous, about a block away from the town square. Wonderful opportunity to have both the fine dining of Jackson and the art galleries to moving up into Yellowstone, where we may stay at the Old Faithful Snow Lodge, a lodge that was built in 1999 to provide an opportunity to sleep in Yellowstone during the heart of the winter. Modern accommodations. Sometimes we stay at the Old Faithful Inn, one of the most historic inns, kind of the classic term we use is parkitecture to describe it. This amazing old lodge built of wooden beams. So pretty unique opportunity when we stay in the heart of Yellowstone. And as we get up into the northern Yellowstone, we stay in some more basic accommodations in the little town of Cook City, Montana. Cook City's not much of a city. It's about 80 people that live in Cook City. So there's a couple small, quaint hotels, all private accommodations, private baths, clean and comfortable. So we choose the best we can get for the area, but it's a variety of types of historic lodges, modern lodges, and rustic accommodations.
Okay, thanks, Jared. Boy, when I asked you about best time to travel, that sent off a flurry of questions that came back in about when the best month is to see all sorts of wildlife. I must have 10 questions here. When's the best time for wolves, bear, elk? So could you just maybe by the season go through the type of wildlife and what you're able to see when?
Sure. Spring, you can see every species that we more or less have in this ecosystem during the spring months, May and June. You have the potential of seeing both wolves and bears, black bears and grizzly bears. Wolves in the spring are tied to their den sites. So wolves breed during the winter months, and they're tied to their den sites. If wolves den in an area that's accessible to people, we have a very good chance of seeing them in the spring. We definitely have an incredible chance of seeing black bears and grizzly bears in the spring because the mountains are covered in snow and the animals come to the valley floor to feed on carcasses and fresh green vegetation. It's also the time they breed. During the spring months, you can see every species of ungulate. Sometimes finding bighorn sheep is a challenge in the spring because they start to move up into the higher elevations, but spring's a great time. And spring is a time for young animals. It's a time that we see the youth being born. The fall, as we get into the fall, and I'm just going to exclude summer because we typically do some custom family programs. Most of our trips are spring, fall, and winter. Fall is an amazing time to see breeding behavior of large ungulates, to see a moose with its velvet peeling off of its antlers and sparring with another bull moose, to see a herd of elk being chased by a big bull as that bull corrals a harem. That's an opportunity to see in the fall, to see bison putting on that thick winter coat, a great opportunity. We see bears in the fall because they're fattening up. You may remember there was an image of a black bear eating some rose hips early on in the slideshow. That's a classic fall type of scenario. As we get into winter, we're not going to see bears. Bears are hibernating during the winter. Their strategy to survive is go and hide and save that fat for the winter months to endure. But if there is an opportunity to see wolves in kind of the most raw and basic feeling, it's typically during the winter months. But during the winter months, you're going to have incredible encounters with elk and bison and bighorn sheep and various birds of prey.
Great. Okay.
Does that sound good?
That does. That sounds good. Thank you.
I bet you all want to come for every season.
I know. Okay. Well, so we're going to go from wildlife to pests. There's a question here about mosquitoes and black flies, biting insects. Are those common in the summer months?
Yeah, that's a great question. Mosquitoes definitely are here. We are a pretty dry environment. If you look at this picture on the screen right now, you can see that sagebrush. It's an area where snow quickly recedes into runoff and then moves out of the valley through our large river system. So we don't have a lot of standing water here. The peak of our mosquito season is about the middle 2 weeks of June. And so there are mosquitoes, but they're usually not too bad. We don't have black flies. We don't have many other biting insects. Going for walks, it's pretty rare to see a tick or anything like that. But it's an honest question. And for me, I've lived in Alaska. I don't think mosquitoes are too bad here. They're short. It's about a 2-week period where they're a little bit pesky, but that's it.
Okay. Good. Thanks. All right, we're going to shift away from wildlife just for a moment, and I'm going to ask you a few other questions. This is about age limits for guests. Are there age limits, too young or too old? And are there, and also maybe we can address the question about mobility and whether there might be any mobility limitations.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to know that our trips are vehicle-based. We are traveling and covering great distances. All the vehicles we use are customized to be how we like to describe them as safari style, meaning that they have more of a captain's type chair in them. They may be vans that historically would be considered a 15-passenger van, but we never put more than 7 people into a vehicle with a guide. And so mobility is not as much of an issue as some people may think. While we love to get off the beaten path and get away, we can still do that even if mobility is not the greatest for people. And for those that do have the opportunity, especially when we have 2 guides present on the trip, which is very common, we can help facilitate unique experiences by getting a little further from road-based scenarios. So we will do our best. We provide the opportunity to have walking sticks for anybody that needs those kind of things, where you're more than welcome to bring those types of pieces of equipment with you. In terms of age limits, you know, we've had every age on our trips over the years, and while often the distances and the time that we spend watching wildlife is more suited to adults, during the summer months we do a lot of family programs. Natural Habitat customizes family programs for families where we have the opportunity to travel less distance, spend more nights in hotel accommodations without changing an accommodation, where we can get out and we can explore on foot for kids. So we do accommodate all ages. One thing on the summer trips is that we do a scenic float down the Snake River, and there is an age minimum of 6 years of age to do that scenic float. And we've had kids that have been younger, and we've just made alternative arrangements to provide another activity in lieu of the scenic float.
Okay. And speaking of activities, there's a question about, I think, whether the tours allow for some free time, or specifically it's talking about hiking, but is there free time, or are there other activities that people can do when they're on tour?
Yeah, depending upon the trip and the particular itinerary, free time is not super abundant, and the reason why I say that is we try to maximize every bit of time enjoying the landscape. Now, that being said, opportunities are always optional. If somebody wants to stay back at a hotel and have a little downtime, that's acceptable. If they want to go on a walk on their own, sometimes that's acceptable, sometimes it's not, depending upon where we are due to wildlife activity. So we just need to be a little bit aware of that. One thing I can make sure of is that when you go home from your vacation, you'll be tired, and in a good way, because we want to make sure that you've gotten the most out of this place. So while free time can happen, we definitely try to fill our opportunities pretty full, but we also understand vacation is vacation, and you have to be able to process and enjoy on your own time as well.
Okay, thanks. A couple logistics questions. This one is about how guests arrive. Do they fly into Jackson and then transfer to the park, or is there another route?
Yeah, depending upon the season. The winter trips start in Jackson and end in Bozeman, Montana, or start in Bozeman and end in Jackson. So the wintertime trips, because of the logistics of getting through the park, are a one-directional trip. Spring and fall and summer, for that matter, all those trips start in Jackson, Wyoming. And we will, on day 1 of the trip, arrive at the airport and be waiting there for you as you disembark from your plane. We will then transfer you to the hotel for the afternoon, or straight to our welcome dinner, which we typically do on our first evening, and get the group together for an orientation. So most summer trips, or all summer trips, start in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Winter trips may start in Jackson and end in Bozeman, or they may start in Bozeman and end in Jackson, just depending upon the particular departure. And that doesn't make one trip better than the other. They're just slightly different. The itineraries are the same. They're just basically in opposite directions. So there's really no difference.
Okay. I think we have time for a couple more questions here. So I want to, several people asked about this. There's a concern about crowds. We have a guest on with us who visited the park last September and was a little disappointed in the crowds. Do the Natural Habitat Adventures experiences help avoid these crowds?
Yeah, we definitely try to put ourselves in situations where we're going to get away from some of the crowds. Inevitably in Yellowstone, there are certain factors that we just can't avoid. And September has, over the years, become a very desirable month to be in the parks because the weather is just absolutely stunning. In Grand Teton National Park, based upon the history of the park, there's a lot of opportunities to get away from the main road system, to get down to little dirt two-track roads where these were historical ranch roads, and get away from crowds. Very easy to do at Grand Teton Park. In Yellowstone National Park, the road was established back in the early 1900s, and it's just one main road system. It's kind of situated as a figure eight. And it's a little bit more challenging there. But we do offer the opportunity to hike and just do short walks. You know, they don't have to be miles. They can literally be going over a ridge to an old wolf den or an old bear den and get away from some of the crowds. But remember, Yellowstone is, in the summer months, a highly visited park. And in order to let yourself experience it in a way that reduces the crowds, maybe we go watch Old Faithful after dinner at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and let your other senses become a dominant thing. Not necessarily your eyes, but your ears and your smell. And that way, an icon that typically may have a couple thousand people around it during the midday hours is all to yourself. So we do try and we recognize that it is a highly visited park, and we try to give you an opportunity to experience it in more of a pristine and quiet setting.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, we have a handful of questions here that we'll send along to the office for some follow-up. I think you did a very thorough job in answering all of the questions that I was able to get into you today, so thank you so much. Our hour is just about up, so I want to turn it back over to you now, Jared, for anything else you would like to share before we go.
Well, thanks, Lee. Well, I really appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to learn a little bit more about the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. As I said when I opened up the talk, it's really a wonderful privilege to be able to share this place, my home, with our guests. And it's something that we take great pride in. We do recognize that Yellowstone is accessible for a lot of people, and some people believe that it can be a very busy place, and it can be. But it's a place that really provides amazing wildlife viewing, amazing landscapes, and is truly something that this country and we all, really the world, should be proud of, that we've protected. And for me to make my home here, it's really a privilege. And I thank you for taking an interest in it, and Natural Habitat for allowing me this opportunity to share it with you. So please feel free to talk to folks at the home office in Boulder, Colorado. Believe me, they will call me with questions and email me with questions if you stump them. So I challenge you to come up with some good ones, and we'll be back in touch.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, and thanks to Megan, who's been working in the background answering a lot of questions as well. That's it from us for now. We do have another webinar coming up, and that will be in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be talking about polar bears, which I know is also something that Jared knows a lot about. So if you like this, we hope you'll come back again in a few weeks and hear more from us on our next topic, which is conserving polar bears in the Arctic. And with that, we will say good day and conclude our webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jared.